spotlight with crime making national headlines.
San Franciscans don't feel safe.
And a recall vote approaching. The San Francisco DA is here to defend his record. Listen closely and decide, should the San Francisco District Attorney be recalled?
We are live in San Francisco tonight, where next month voters will head to the polls. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Catherine Heenan. One of the most controversial issues on that ballot is this question: shall Chesa Boudin be recalled from the office of District Attorney? And tonight, Chesa Boudin is here to address the concerns of voters. Thank you for doing this. We appreciate it, Mr. Boudin.
Good to be with you.
You took office in 2020. You ran on progressive reform. You have always said, I think from day one, that your top priority is keeping people safe, making people feel safe. And some San Francisco residents are saying they do not. A poll commissioned by your opponent says 73% of likely voters disagree that you're keeping the city safe. If that's how people feel, what are you doing about it?
Well, we've got a lot of work to do to make San Francisco the safest city possible. We need everybody to feel safe and to be safe in their homes, in their neighborhoods, and everywhere in our city. And I'm really proud of the work we've done in historically challenging circumstances during a pandemic, with our courts largely shut down during most of my tenure. I'd never heard of Zoom when I took office, and here we are, living our lives, running our office, doing job interviews to hire amazing, talented staff. And we've done a tremendous amount of work to improve public safety in San Francisco, including groundbreaking investigations on auto burglaries, which we can talk more about, suing the manufacturers of illegal ghost guns that are designed to be used in crimes, and standing up for our small businesses, especially immigrant-owned businesses, against frivolous, unlawful lawsuits filed in the name of disability rights, but really lining the pockets of unscrupulous plaintiffs' lawyers.
You say Republicans are behind this recall, Mr. Boudin. We are in a mostly Democratic, progressive city. More than 83,000 people did sign that recall petition. So how did we get here?
Well, let's be clear about who's on which side of this recall issue. The official endorsements for the recall include the Republican Party. Fox News hosts Tucker Carlson and Senators Ted Cruz and Tom Cotton regularly tweet about their support for my recall. I'm proud to stand in opposition to the recall with the San Francisco Democratic Party, with the ACLU, the Sierra Club, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Bay Area Reporter, the San Francisco Labor Council, the teachers, the nurses, and so many other people. The truth is, everybody who San Francisco voters trust is opposing this recall, and we're urging voters to vote no on Proposition H.
You have said, of course, that your focus is on prosecuting violent crime and serious crime, but it's not just violent crime. And there are things like shoplifting, burglary, theft, vandalism, things like this. We have some video there, Chesa. A man walking into the CVS on Nob Hill, this was last month, filling a backpack, walking out, taking his time, and we do see a lot of these videos. Do you consider what we're looking at here to be a serious crime?
Well, the California Penal Code defines it as a non-serious crime, but I think any crime in San Francisco is serious, and I want to make sure that we send a clear message to people who commit crimes. If you get arrested, there's going to be consequences. And in cases like that, unfortunately, we don't get that many swings at the pitch. We depend on the police to bring us arrests and investigations before we can prosecute that kind of street-level crime. And when it comes to auto burglaries and shoplifting, police in San Francisco today are making arrests in less than 3% of reported crimes. That means 97, 98% of the time a crime like that occurs, whether there's a video or not, my office isn't being brought a case to prosecute. But when we are, we prosecute those cases at rates that are up to 50% higher than the, 50 times higher than the police are making arrests.
Well, going back to what we saw there a minute ago, what should happen to people who commit crimes like these?
Well, the first thing is they should be arrested. And the National Institute of Justice has showed that the most effective deterrent, we talk about the death penalty or diversion programs and anything in between, the most effective deterrent is simply likelihood of arrest. If people know they're going to get arrested, they're far less likely to commit crimes, regardless of what punishment happens after the fact. But the first thing is they should be arrested, they should be brought to my office, we should file charges against them, and then we should go through the court system, depending on their criminal history, on what sort of issues are leading to their criminal behavior. Look, I want every arrest to be an opportunity for intervention and transforming lives away from crime. But we can't do that until and unless an arrest is made.
All right, you mentioned diversion, and your office has released information comparing your administration to your predecessors, and yes, that is the big difference that does jump out. Your expansion of diversion programs, for people who don't know, they generally keep people out of jail. There's counseling, treatment programs, including drug-related cases, some robberies and assaults. How can you reassure voters, Mr. Boudin, that those programs are working?
Well, there's two really important things to know about diversion. Three, actually. The first one is this. When we refer a case to diversion, we do not lose the ability to use the traditional criminal prosecution approach. If the person doesn't successfully complete diversion, those criminal charges that we filed are still pending. The second thing that's important to know is these are evidence-based programs. If you look at research out of the California Policy Lab at Cal Berkeley or other published research from around the state and across the country, diversion programs are expanding in San Francisco and beyond because they work. They reduce the likelihood of someone who's been arrested and charged with a crime from being rearrested in the future. In other words, they make us safer, and that's why we use them. The third thing that's important to know is the expansion of diversion under my leadership is not simply my policies in practice. These are state laws that have come onto the books over the last several years. Mental health diversion, veterans court, misdemeanor diversion. These are new state laws that were passed by the legislature, signed by the governor, in which San Francisco is implementing. And in every one of these cases, it's not just me unilaterally making a decision. We're doing it in conversation with judges who get the final word about whether a case is eligible for diversion, and ultimately, a year or 2 years later, whether the suspect, the defendant, has successfully completed the program. If they haven't, those criminal charges are still pending.
All right, and how many people are successfully completing them? Do we have some idea?
Well, we know that they're often more rigorous and time-consuming than simply going through the normal criminal process. I have judges call me on a regular basis and say, DA, we need you to make treatment and mental health access the path of least resistance. Right now, they tell me, it's easier for people to plead guilty, take the conviction and be on probation and keep using drugs or avoiding engaging with the mental health care they need. And so one of the challenges we have in the courts is how do we actually incentivize people to engage with the services and the treatment that we know is the most effective way to prevent future crime.
And maybe just clarify for people who don't complete the program, Mr. Boudin, or don't show up, what happens?
Well, if you don't show up to court, then a warrant for your arrest will issue. And if you don't complete a program and the judge decides that your violation of the terms are significant, then you get kicked out of the diversion program and you go right back over to the regular criminal courtroom. So, for example, if we charge you with shoplifting and you go to diversion, which, by the way, you're entitled to under state law. This isn't a policy of mine. That's what state law says. And you don't comply with the terms of diversion, you get rearrested or you fail to participate in the classes that you're required to participate in, that shoplifting charge is still pending in criminal court, and all of the same sanctions and possible punishments are still available to us and to the court to impose.
We have to talk about car break-ins. There are tens of thousands of them every year in San Francisco. We've all seen the broken glass scenes like this. So we know that's not a new problem by a long shot. And you have pointed out, and you're right, the arrest rates are very low, but your opponents are all over you on this, Mr. Boudin. Here's part of an ad that they are running. It claims that you dissolved a car break-in unit.
When Chesa Boudin took office, he dissolved the unit and stopped me from collaborating with the police on my cases.
All right, did you dissolve the car break-in unit?
No, you know, it's disappointing to see people who are so ambitious personally that they just won't let facts get in the way. that's unbelievably dishonest. Let me be very clear about a couple things. We are prosecuting auto burglaries at comparable rates to the rates they've always been prosecuted at in our office and across the Bay Area. The second thing I want to be clear about is that Ms. Alumi, the person in that ad, actually didn't work for me my first year in office. She was on leave out of the office for the entire first year I was in office, except for 20 hours. So, of course, she wasn't working with police. She wasn't working at all. She'd taken a leave of absence from the office before I was even sworn in. And the most important thing is the operations that I initiated to go after auto burglars, to detect and dismantle fencing operations that are moving millions of dollars of stolen goods from cars and from retail establishments. Those operations are ongoing. And in fact, we made a major arrest earlier today. This is an ongoing operation, and Miss Alumi in that ad knows it perfectly well because she sent emails to me and to other staff members thanking us for our work on this operation before she left the office.
Was she told by someone, don't collaborate with police?
It's preposterous. We work with police in 99% of our cases every single day. They are the most important witnesses in the overwhelming majority of cases that we prosecute. The notion that anybody in a district attorney's office, anywhere in the country, would be told, don't collaborate with police is so disingenuous and dishonest as to be laughable to anybody who's actually seen what happens day in, day out in the Hall of Justice.
All right, just one more question. She sounds so adamant. That car unit, was it in some way downsized or merged or moved? Were there changes made to that car break-in unit?
Well, the unit was a single person. It was her, and she was funded by a grant. And because she was on a leave of absence during my entire first year, another attorney took over her role on that grant. And we've always had that grant fully staffed, and we continue to.
All right, car break-ins do seem to, obviously, they drive people crazy. Are there changes you can advocate for to make things better, or are there many options?
Absolutely. And let's be clear about the scope of the problem. I know you remember, Catherine, when I came on your show back in 2019, when I was a candidate for this office, one of the hot topics was auto burglaries, right? And in fact, the peak of reported auto burglaries in San Francisco was in 2017. We've seen a pretty steady decline in the number of auto burglaries in San Francisco. There was a 40% decline my first year in office. Now, that's not enough for me. We need to continue to do better. And we know that as we reopen after the pandemic, we're seeing auto burglaries start to climb back up to near where they were in 2019. So yes, we have to do better. And the first thing is we're going to continue to vigorously prosecute all of the cases police bring us. But because they're only able to solve this year, 1% of reported auto burglaries, we have to do better. And that's why the operation I started in 2021 is aimed at getting around the issue of who breaks into the car and targeting the fencing operations that move millions of dollars of stolen goods. And look, my office, since I took office, has participated in and led operations that have recovered more than $8 million in stolen goods. Goods stolen out of cars and from businesses in San Francisco that are stored in warehouses all around the Bay Area. That's the kind of operation that I'm proud to lead, and I'm always happy to prosecute cases that the police bring us.
All right, we can keep mentioning the police. How would you describe your relationship with the police?
I have a great relationship with Chief Scott. I was at an event with him earlier tonight. We were celebrating the swearing in of a new police commissioner. But let's be honest, there are real tensions between the district attorney's office and the police union in particular. These aren't new problems. You know, if you go back to my predecessor, D.A. Gascon, he had been the chief of police prior to becoming district attorney, and it didn't stop the Police Officers Association from viciously attacking him, undermining his administration. And you can go back further. Our vice president, Kamala Harris, took office as district attorney in San Francisco, her first elected office, after making a promise to voters that she would not seek the death penalty. And when she stood by that promise, the Police Officers Association viciously attacked her. This is not a new problem. And so it's not a surprise at all to see the Police Officers Association trying to undermine me, my office, and the hard work that my staff do day in, day out to hold people accountable, to follow the law, to pursue reforms that make our communities safer.
We know Chief Scott in February initially pulled out of a reform agreement that put you in charge of investigating police shootings. That's been extended, last I heard. But should voters in any way be uneasy that the city's top two law enforcement officers don't seem to be operating on the same page, or do they need to be?
No, Chief Scott and I share a deep commitment to making San Francisco safe, to police reform, and to using our limited resources to make sure that people who are victims of crime receive justice. Now, obviously, we both face different challenges, bottlenecks, and pressures. And I know that there's lots of staff in my office that wish the police could increase their clearance rates. And I'm sure there's lots of police officers who wish that people they arrested weren't being released from custody so quickly. We've got to work together. And one of my commitments to voters over the years ahead in my term is to make sure that all San Francisco agencies that have a role to play in public safety, police, district attorney, courts, probation, parole, sheriff, all of us have to work together better. And one of the things that's so dangerous and dishonest about the recall campaign's rhetoric is instead of having a nuanced, complicated, honest conversation about the real challenges that we face in San Francisco and beyond when it comes to improving public safety, they want to trick people into thinking that simply replacing one elected official with someone appointed by the mayor is going to solve all these problems. Solving these problems takes work and collaboration, and I'm committed to doing that work.
How about your relationship with the mayor? I mean, she has expressed concern over public safety. She even said at one point, you're not on the same page. In February, she said, we need to start concentrating more on supporting the victims of this city than we are supporting, in some cases, sadly, the criminals. Is that what's happening?
Well, let me be crystal clear. Every single budget that I've submitted to the mayor and the Board of Supervisors since taking office has prioritized asking for an increase in resources for victim services. And I'm proud of the record that I have and my office has in expanding victim services. I created 10 new full-time victim advocate positions. 8 of the people we hired are fully bilingual. 2 of them are dedicated property crime advocates. We never had advocates for property crimes until I took office. We never had more than a single victim advocate speaking Chinese to serve the entire Chinese-speaking population of San Francisco. Now we've increased that number to 5. And the head of my victim services division, someone I recruited, hired, and promoted, is the first ever Chinese-American head of San Francisco's Victim Services Division. We are doing everything in our power to put victims first, to provide resources and trauma-informed care. And I promise you, and I promise the voters of San Francisco, that as long as I'm district attorney, every single budget that I submit to the mayor will always ask for resources for our victims.
Any kind of crime, be it violent crime, nonviolent crime, can be tough to solve. They all have real victims. You touched on this, Mr. Boudin. What do you say to victims or police when a detective or an officer does track down a suspect, does make an arrest, and that person is seemingly right back in the community?
Well, the first thing is about 92% of crimes never do result in an arrest. So we've got to figure out how we can increase the clearance rate for police bringing me cases. In that 8% of cases that do result in an arrest, most of the time, nonviolent offenders are released from custody before my office even receives the police report. Again, we need a nuanced conversation about all the stakeholders. Judges review every arrest and make decisions about release or detention before my office is even in a position to decide what charges to file. Once we file charges, we go to court and we make our arguments. And in cases where we believe the person we're charging should be held in custody, we ask the judge to do that. And in some cases, the judges disagree and they release people over my objection. The judges, not the DAs, are the ones who make the decision about release or detention. And we have to respect the checks and balances that our forefathers and founders of this country built in to our system of government, even when we disagree, vehemently disagree, with the decisions that judges make in individual cases.
Not always a nuanced conversation. You're a frequent target of conservative media. They argue criminals in San Francisco operate with impunity. Is that just a perception? Nothing could be further from the truth. Let's be very clear about what the data shows. I am charging crimes across the board at higher rates than my predecessor and than district attorneys around the Bay Area. I'm securing convictions in a higher rate of homicide charges than my predecessor did. We are charging sexual assault cases at higher rates than my predecessor did. And this is important.
Sexual assault cases are notoriously difficult to prove and cause lifelong trauma to survivors. And it's not just that we are prosecuting them at a higher rate, it's that we are taking a stand to eliminate barriers to victims coming forward and cooperating and reporting with law enforcement. For example, when we found that the San Francisco Police Department Crime Lab was storing sexual assault victims' DNA in a secret database and testing all future unknown DNA samples against that database without the permission of those victims, without a warrant to do so. We didn't sweep it under the rug. We stood up. We partnered with our Board of Supervisors that unanimously passed a resolution prohibiting that practice, and we partnered with State Senator Scott Wiener to introduce legislation that's now passed the Senate Public Safety Committee that would prohibit law enforcement agencies across the state of California from ever storing or using a sexual assault survivor's DNA profile for any purpose other than bringing the person that assaulted them to justice.
All right, we have to talk about drug use, open-air drug use in the Tenderloin, still a big problem, drug dealing, sometimes drug deaths. We have done stories with users who tell our reporters they specifically come to San Francisco because they feel they won't be hassled. Is that really the case?
Well, let's start with the bottom line here, which is that the overdoses and the fatal overdoses in San Francisco and across the country are devastating. And they're rising all across the country. It's not a problem limited to San Francisco. We need a more effective response to the drug crisis on our streets. And it has to start with a public health response. We need it to be easier to get help than it is to get high in San Francisco. And look, law enforcement has limited tools. What I can do primarily is I can prosecute the drug dealers that police arrest. But in San Francisco right now, police are making arrests citywide in about 2 drug sales cases a day.
Is there any ray of hope for people who do have to live and work in that area, visitors and locals? Is there any hope of things changing?
Absolutely.
Fast.
Absolutely.
Faster, anyway.
Well, we need to move with the urgency the crisis demands. And I asked for an emergency supplemental budget back in February of 2021 because I said we need a fentanyl task force. We need to bring together law enforcement and public health officials, and we need to invest in this crisis the way we did in the COVID-19 pandemic. Sadly, nobody in City Hall even introduced the supplemental budget that I requested, and it went nowhere. But we're continuing to prosecute drug sales cases that police do bring us at higher rates than any other category of crime. And we know that the war on drugs has not worked. We can't simply rely on arrests and prosecutions, especially for people who are living with addiction. We need to invest in treatment on demand and on safe consumption sites so that no overdose is fatal, and so that we can connect people who are using drugs with the kinds of services, with the kinds of treatment that can change their lives and save lives in the process.
Should drug users be arrested?
I think there's a big difference between users and dealers. And we can't tolerate illegal drug sales in San Francisco. We can't tolerate people coming into our communities and dumping fentanyl into the hands of folks who are all too often overdosing and dying. When people are addicted, however, we know that simply putting them in jail or giving them another criminal conviction is not an effective response. What we need to do is make treatment on demand available. We need to make sure that there's 24/7 access to drug treatment so that when people are using and they want to get help, help is available for them.
All right, but bottom line, just to be really clear for people, no on arresting drug users.
You know, I think if there were a program like law enforcement assisted diversion, a program we used to have in San Francisco, but sadly, before my administration, the funding was cut. It's a program that's worked really well in Seattle. I think law enforcement can play a role in arresting users if the goal is to connect them with services. But right now in San Francisco, those services don't exist. Our judges who oversee our drug court and our other treatment courts are regularly complaining to me, to the head of the Department of Public Health, that people who are statutorily eligible for drug treatment programs are often waiting in county jail for weeks or months to get placed into a program. We've got to invest seriously in the kinds of treatment programs that save lives, that help people on a path to sobriety and prevent crimes and make all of us safer in the process.
There's been a number of highly publicized incidents of Asian hate crime, as you know, and of course we have a large Asian American community in San Francisco. What specifically are you doing to keep that community safe?
The rise in anti-Asian crime in San Francisco and across the country has been outrageous. And we know that it was promoted and encouraged by racist rhetoric coming out of the White House during the beginning of the pandemic. I'm proud of my record dramatically expanding the number of Chinese and Asian staff in my office, increasing language access with the first in the state policy to require court-certified interpreters be requested for any victim who wants to watch their case move through the court system. And I'm proud of my record prosecuting and holding people accountable who victimize Asian elders. I've personally gone to the hospital to visit victims of violent crime. I've also personally gone to court to argue to the judges that the people committing these crimes should be detained in custody pending trial. And we've dramatically increased the resources available for prosecuting hate crimes. We conducted a training with the San Francisco Police Department so that officers, all the officers on the force, know what kinds of evidence to gather, what kinds of questions to ask, so that they can bring us the material we need to hold people accountable. And if you look at any individual case where police have made an arrest in an anti-Asian crime, I am proud of the work my prosecutors have done, holding people accountable, having serious consequences that are grounded in the law and the evidence that the police brought to us.
Well, let me ask you this. In a very progressive city like San Francisco, the fact that a recall has had some support, it has come to this point, might indicate that the mood of the electorate has changed over the last couple of years. Have you changed any views, Mr. Boudin, to address those concerns?
First of all, it's been a tremendously steep learning curve for me. I had never prosecuted a case when I took office, and now I've appeared in court on all manner of cases, and I personally secured an indictment from a grand jury in a murder case. So it has been a steep learning curve, and my views have absolutely changed. I meet almost every day with crime victims, everything from shoplifting to murders. And meeting with crime victims and hearing the pain that they experience and that they live with has absolutely changed my views. And one of the things it's made crystal clear to me is that we have to invest more seriously, more substantially in meeting the needs of victims, because they're not getting met today, and we've got to do better. And that's why I will continue to demand more investment from City Hall, in our Victim Services Division, and in our community partners who provide the much-needed services to victims. But the other thing that we have to remember is that the work we're doing, whether it be suing gun manufacturers, whether it be going after wage theft, is work that is widely popular in San Francisco. When I talk to voters, they support police reform and accountability. They support prosecuting companies that steal from their employees. And let's remember who's funding this recall. The biggest individual donor, William Oberndorf, is a billionaire Republican.
Almost out of time, and in fact, there's almost no time. Very quickly, Mr. Boudin, voters go to the polls in about a month. What's one key reason you would give them to say no on the recall?
You elected me to serve a 4-year term, and we've been fighting historically challenging circumstances. Everybody you trust opposes this recall, from the Chronicle to the Democratic Party, from former Assessor Recorder Mabel Tang to former Supervisor Norman Yee, from President of the Board of Supervisors Shaman Walton to the San Francisco Labor Council. Our teachers, our nurses, don't join forces with the Republicans funding and endorsing this recall. Stand with the people you trust, with the nurses, with the teachers. Stand for democracy and allow us to finish the term you elected us to serve.
All right, we now are definitely out of time, but thank you, Mr. Boudin, for talking to us and being here and answering these questions. Election Day is June 7th. Thank you for being with us, and thanks for watching.